In a joint statement, the leaders of the UK, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands and Japan have condemned in what they say are the strongest terms attacks by Iran on gas and oil installations. After Israel struck the South Pars gas field on Wednesday, Iran responded with retaliatory attacks overnight throughout the Gulf. And this has led to a sharp jump in global energy prices. Meanwhile, in a strongly worded post, Donald Trump warned Iran against further attacks in Qatar after extensive damage to energy facilities there. Posting on Truth Social, the president said the US knew nothing about the Israeli strike on the South Pars gas field. President Trump said if Iran attacks that hub again, the US would, quote, massively blow up the entirety of the South Pars gas field at an amount of strength and power that Iran has never seen before. Well, Qatar's state energy company says that gas facilities at its main site, Ras Laffan, were hit again by rockets early on Thursday morning. It said they'd caused fires and further significant damage. These are pictures of the aftermath of those initial strikes. Huge fires could be seen from more than 30 kilometres away. Iran's South Pars is part of the biggest natural gas field in the world, with which both Qatar and Iran operate facilities in. Israel is yet to comment. Well, as we mentioned, the US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has been speaking in the last couple of hours, talking about the wider conflict. He said Iran's ability to manufacture new ballistic missiles has probably taken the hardest hit after combined strikes by the US and Israel.
Our objectives, unchanged, on target, and on plan. Destroy missiles, launchers, and Iran's defense industrial base so they cannot rebuild, destroy their navy, and Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. We've hit hundreds of their defense industrial bases directly. Their ability to manufacture new ballistic missiles has probably taken the hardest hit of all. Ballistic missile attacks against our forces, down 90% since the start of the conflict. Same with one-way attack UAVs. Think kamikaze drones, down 90%. The last job anyone in the world wants right now? Senior leader for the IRGC or Besiege. Temp jobs, all of them. And to borrow a page from Admiral Ernest King in World War II, we've decided to share the ocean with Iran. We've given them the bottom half. We've damaged or sunk over 120 of their Navy ships, with battle damage assessments pending for many more. See, oftentimes we have to wait a few days on battle damage assessment to get the real number. Their surface fleet is no longer a factor. Their submarines, they once had 11, are gone. Their military ports are crippled. We wouldn't want to set a definitive time frame on that, but as we've said, we're on plan. So we're looking at those metrics very closely, relaying that to the president and the national security team.
Well, let's go live now to Washington and our State Department correspondent, Tom Bateman. Tom, hello to you. Beyond what Pete Hegseth was talking about there in terms of military targets, what did we learn about US objectives in this war?
Well, I think the main point, I was in the room there, was that although this war has changed significantly since day one, the message from the Pentagon and from Pete Hegseth has not. And I think, it was quite deliberate. He's, saying, we keep our focus. We've got the same objectives. The problem I think that the Americans have here now is that Iran is fighting a different war to the one the Americans started with, and it's causing the US significant problems. And what we're not hearing in those briefings is how the Americans plan to deal with that. So, we heard again that the Americans say that they have been striking ballistic missile launch sites and the missiles themselves, continuing to strike Iran's navy and its naval fleet. But of course, the Iranians have been fighting largely with insurgent tactics that has allowed them to control the Strait of Hormuz, which has had this huge effect, of course, on global markets and the price of oil. And we now have this sharply escalating war over the region's energy production infrastructure, which is really serious. You're seeing the effects of that. And there was really very, very little in that briefing about tactically how the Americans plan to deal with either of those things. So the message hasn't changed since day one. We did hear a little bit from General Kane about attacking Iranian fast boats, which is about trying to stop the attacks or the harassment of shipping. But generally, there was very, very little on the way that the Iranians sort of shifted the way they're fighting this war and what the Americans are actually doing in response to that.
And it was interesting to hear Pete Hegseth say that there was no definitive time frame for ending the war. But at the same time, looking at my notes from earlier, he said, addressing the American people, the media here, not all of it, wants you to think that we are spinning towards an endless abyss, a forever war. And that is a point that the administration is incredibly sensitive about, isn't it?
It's really sensitive about that because, of course, President Trump stood twice in elections that he won on a platform of not repeating the mistakes of the past, not getting bogged down into an Iraq-style war that goes on for years, that involves nation building, that tries to spread American ideals to parts of the Middle East. Pete Hegseth has been really clear about that. But the problem they have is there's significant influential part of the MAGA, President Trump's MAGA base, that is saying exactly the opposite, that is suggesting they've been betrayed by the administration that has launched exactly that. So the administration is extremely sensitive about that. He launched an attack on the media once again, saying it was unpatriotic, that it wasn't supporting the American war. In fact, that was the first thing he talked about, not the conflict itself. It was the culture war at home, really, that was the focus of his attention. And also suggesting, again, falsely, that it was the mainstream media that had run fake AI images that the Iranians had disseminated about the war and effectively accusing them of sort of rerunning Iranian propaganda. Well, there's no evidence for that. And it's, of course, really been social media where this sort of torrent of AI images have proliferated. And ironically, it is this administration that has loosened all of the regulations and rules on social media companies that allows them to run this material. But I think, it takes you to the issue that I think the administration is really determined to try and grip control of the narrative on this conflict at the moment.
Tom, sorry to interrupt. I just want to squeeze in one more question, very briefly, if you would, with your response. Are we going to get any clarification on President Trump saying that he didn't know that Israel was planning to strike the Iranian part of the South Pars gas field, when it's been widely reported that he did, or at least that the administration did?
Well, I think we will, because President Trump, as you know, within, I think, the next hour or so is due the White House meeting the Japanese premier. So I'm sure there'll be a question on that if the press are in there. Of course, his claim that the Americans didn't know contradicts the briefings that the Israelis have been putting out after they struck oil depots earlier in the war. The Americans were really unhappy about that. So the Israelis have been saying that they're not doing anything without American consent or approval first. So there's clearly a difference of description over the run-up to that attack on South Pars. And I would assume, quite strongly the president's going to be asked that question. We might get something more later.
OK, Tom, thank you very much. Tom Bateman.